Less than a dozen classified documents from Joe Biden's time as vice president have been found by Biden's lawyers, immediately turned over to the National Archives. These were found at the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. That's at the University of Pennsylvania. This is from Biden's time as an honorary professor. Now, of course, you know where this is going. The right wing is trying to make this out to be the exact same as Trump's classified documents story as a way to say Trump shouldn't be held accountable in that situation if accountability is warranted. But we will dive into the details, and as you do, you understand this is a very, very different and less significant situation. But before we look at this being reported on CNN, just up front, as I say with any story like this, regardless of it being not as significant as the Trump Mar-a-Lago story, as we'll get into in a second here, still, absolutely, if there was wrongdoing, hold the proper people accountable. No problem with that. As we should always do, there's no need to insert partisanship where it doesn't belong. You can just look at the facts and understand the situation. So take a look at this being reported on CNN.
These were documents, the White House says, that were found by the current president's attorneys in November as they were closing out an office that the former vice president, Biden, of course, had set up an office with the University of Pennsylvania at the Penn Biden Center here in Washington. And they were closing out these offices when they found what they say were fewer than a dozen documents that were labeled as classified. Now, a number of these documents were also subject to the Presidential Records Act. And according to the White House, these were now turned over to the National Archives, which has asked the Justice Department to look into it. Now, we're told now, Jake, that the Attorney General Merrick Garland has asked the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to conduct a review of these documents, which is a standard process that they would go through. This is akin to the process that happened after the National Archives asked the Justice Department to look into these classified materials that were recovered from Mar-a-Lago, from the former President Trump's residence. So it is a process that the Justice Department recently went through, obviously, with Donald Trump. Of course, the difference here is that according to the White House, it was the president's legal team that reached out to NARA to turn over these documents, as opposed to with Trump, who fought for months and months not to turn over documents that the archive said needed to be turned over, Jake.
Right. And so there being noted kind of one of the key distinctions, right? When we talked about the Mar-a-Lago story, what was so significant about the timeline? It was that the National Archives came to Trump's team and said, we believe / we know you have classified documents and we need them. And the Trump team would not comply. And then as the investigation goes on, you start understanding that there was an awareness within Trump and his allies that those documents were where they were. And despite being requested by the National Archives to turn them over, they kept holding on to them. And so the story that broke before the raid was, oh, a batch of documents was turned over from Trump to the National Archives. And we kind of went, okay, well, it looks like that resolves the situation. But then the raid occurred, revealing that even more were being held there, even though they knew the National Archives needed them, right? In the situation of these classified documents, less than 12 from Biden's time as vice president, right when Biden's lawyers came across them, they gave them over to the National Archives. There wasn't that obstruction going on from the part or on the part of Biden's team. And again, I say with all of that in mind, if there was wrongdoing, as was noted in that CNN segment you just saw, it's being looked into. It will be reviewed. And if there is accountability warranted, absolutely make it happen. But we have to be honest when we look at these facts and say, this is not at all what went on with Trump and Mar-a-Lago. Let me know what you think. Luke P. Beasley on Twitter.